Hello, and welcome to the Destination Interesting podcast. I'm your host, Seth Chalmers. In today's episode, I sit down and have a chat with tourism and sustainability expert Karen Kuhl. Karen is the executive director of Tour Cayuga, the official tourism promotion agency for Cayuga County in the beautiful Finger Lakes region of New York. Let's dive right in. Hi, Karen.
Let's roll.
Welcome to the show. We have Karen, and we also have a cat named Serafina that you might hear from at some point. Thanks for being here.
I'm very glad to be here and get to know you.
Yeah. I think we're going to talk about a lot of fun stuff today. I think we'll talk about Harriet Tubman at some point. We'll talk about Cayuga. We'll talk about the Finger Lakes. We'll talk about what else we're going to talk about Nicaragua. We're going to bounce all around. And we have some interesting overlaps there that I'm excited to dig into and hear more about you. First of all, I guess, can you say what your role is, where you're at, and maybe give some people some context for where the Finger Lakes is?
I am the current executive director for the Cayuga County Tourism Office in the Finger Lakes region of New York State. I've been in this position for about 5 years. So out of the 5 years, 2 have been COVID related. So it's been a really up and down roller coaster kind of job. Our main attraction, one of the most important things that I do, and you already mentioned her name, is being Harriet Tubman's chosen hometown and the responsibility that goes along with promoting a region under her legacy. How I got to tourism was a long, winding road, but always with tourism in mind. You talk to different people about how they ended up in their current tourism position, and 95% of them say, well, I never thought I would work in tourism, but I always did. It was always something that was part of me and my family and my life. So this position right now, it just brings a lot of things that I've done in my past together. So I'm really honored to be where I'm at.
It's amazing. How about we talk a little bit about your early life? Let's first, where were you born? Where did you grow up?
I was born in Nicaragua. My family is German Nicaraguan. My mother is a German native. My dad's a Nicaraguan. My mother's of Nicaraguan descent, though. So there's a lot of course, mutt, like most of us are. But while living in Nicaragua, my parents had a steel construction company, and from that they bought a coffee plantation, and they started building small houses, which they thought they were going to sell as independent building block lots, but people were interested in renting them for the summer. And lo and behold, before you knew it, we were running a hotel. So now we have the Selva Negra Mountain Resort in the highlands of Nicaragua, which is one of the top tourism destinations in the country. Out of not having any idea they were going into the tourism industry, they ended up with this fantastic place. So I grew up there at the beginning stages. And to me, I was always fascinated seeing, because we would spend the weekends up there while we were initially developing the resort. And I would see people transform. I would see my parents transform from the 9-to-5 grunge to being on vacation, to being in a healthy place, to just being able to relax. And I thought it was a superpower, honestly, at the time, to be able to run a place where people could truly relax. And I was 5 years old, and I'm like, this is where I want to do. This is the role that I want to play in people's lives. I didn't know that was tourism. I didn't know it was hotel management, but I knew that that's what I wanted to be. So that's why I tell people I fell in love with the tourism industry at 5 years old, and it has not lost its grasp on me. We exiled from the country in 1990 and moved to the United States. I've lived in the U.S. since. We considered moving to Germany for a little while, so that was an interesting twist of
moment,
fate.
I can imagine.
So I proceeded to get my bachelor's in accounting and management information systems because I knew any business I wanted to run, those would be basics that would be required. I've worked in restaurants. I've managed restaurants. I've been a waitress. I've been a hostess. I've worked in hotels. I've run a tour operator company. So I've been involved in so many different levels of tourism. In 1990, my mom returned to Nicaragua and brought the hotel back to life and the coffee plantation back to life. After I got my master's in tourism destination, I returned and I started running the tourism operations for my parents' destination. And it's where I belonged. It's where I felt at home, and everything just, I mean, my parents' place, it's not just a hotel. It's not just a mountain resort. We have a coffee plantation, we have a cacao plantation, and we house over 200 of the workers. You know, we have a housing complex, basically, which is part of the entire state. There is a farm-run clinic and a farm-run kitchen and childcare and baseball team. So it's a whole community that we're a part of. And the social enterprise of the whole thing is something that was always very impactful to me, and being able to be part of something that gave back so much to the community and to the entire region has always stayed with me. Mm-hmm. I returned to the US in 2018, and that's when I started looking for employment in the tourism industry here. And I was looking for a place that I got that same feeling where I could have the same impact that I was having with my parents' place. And luckily, I ended up someplace that I could.
That's amazing. Had you been to the Finger Lakes region of New York before that?
Actually, I'd been living in two places at the same time. My husband is from the Finger Lakes area, so I've been living in the Finger Lakes for over 20 years. But I knew I was going to be working in Central America, developing all this destination. So I homeschooled my kids.
Cool.
You know, it's like, I love my kids. I'm not going to leave them behind. So we would live in the Finger Lakes for like 2 months and live in Nicaragua for 4 months and then come back and forth. So I've always had a connection to this area.
Well, that sounds like a kind of a magical balance for the kids to be able to experience Nicaragua and experience the kind of beauty of the Finger Lakes. I actually have some overlaps with you. So I have a Nicaragua overlap. My wife and I went to Nicaragua this past summer for a couple weeks, and we were down in Ometepe. We stayed in Granada for a bit, and then we went out to the Corn Islands. So we got to kind of see some very different communities, very different aspects of it, from the Caribbean vibe to the kind of cloud forest, volcanic island experience. And we're going back. We're actually going back next month, and we'll be down there. My wife is volunteering at a clinic down in Tola, in Rivas. So it's kind of wild.
I know. I was so excited when you said that. I'm like, no way. What are the chances? The world is so small. Ometepe is such a beautiful place. Yeah. You know, those two volcanoes on that island, you feel so I'm Maybe
can you describe, because I'm not going to do it justice, describe what it was like for you. I'm picturing you as a 5 or 6 year old going to the forest in the north in Matagalpas, you know, where the farm is, where the family's plantation is. What was that like, the environment, like the actual nature in that experience?
You're engulfed in it. So my parents' place, about 1,500 acres, about 700 acres of that is virgin rainforest.
Wow.
So, you know, it's what you read about in 5th grade. You know, here you're in the rainforest and you see the agoutis and you see the sloths and you see the howler monkeys and the snakes and the giant spiders. You know, it's all there. And one of the biggest changes that you feel even to today, you leave Managua and it's 90 degrees. It is hot. And you get up to the mountains only 2 hours away, and it's in the high 60s. It is beautiful, temperate, mild weather, humid, rain, cicadas, right? Mm-hmm. So whenever we come to the U.S. sometimes and people are talking, oh my gosh, it's raining. My mom looks at me and goes, that is barely cicada pee. That is not rain. That's so funny. Because, you know, we measure rain by feet in a year, not inches in a year. So it's very different. And down where you were, Rivas, it's also a moderate climate, especially on the Ometepe Island, because there's so many forests that the temperature takes a huge dip. And the water is so pure, it's so clear. Oh, It's amazing.
Yeah, we did a horseback ride that took us to a little waterfall on the southern side of the lower portion. I'm trying to remember which volcano that is now off the top of my head. I don't remember. But it was beautiful and it rained. So it was like kind of chilly. It wasn't super hot. It was perfect. And I'm definitely excited to go back. But now I need to go to the north. I need to get to Matagalpas and check it out.
I'll hook you up.
It might have to be on the next trip that we go down there, because I'm certain there will be many more. And it's actually funny how we ended up in Nicaragua. We were discussing, we had done a lot of trips. We had gone to Europe and Scotland and done some of that sort of exploration together. And she said, we need to do a tropical trip. We need to go somewhere that's completely different. And she had been to Costa Rica. And then we realized, hey, you know what? There's an interesting complication, though, I think, when you look at, if you're American and you're thinking of traveling somewhere in Central America, you might look at the State Department's warnings, and those might ward you off from certain places in the world. And understandably so. There are challenges that are happening in these countries, but I found the people were just absolutely amazing. We didn't have any issues. I rented a motorcycle when we were on Ometepe, and so we just zipped around everywhere, and it was great.
Yeah, no, it is absolutely wonderful. The people are very caring. They're very genuine. You mentioned that your wife had been in Costa Rica. It's like a little rivalry between los Ticas y los Nicas. But we joke that in Costa Rica, people will tell you, it's like, yeah, that was such a great time. Call me sometime, but leave without giving you their number.
Uh-huh.
Where Nicaraguans will open up their door, invite you in, give you tortilla cuajada, and, have a very personal connection. So that, yeah, the people are extremely humble and extremely entrepreneurial. I don't know if you've ever been stuck behind, cow traffic, and suddenly people come out of the woodworks and they're selling, rosquillas, and they have drinks in the bag. It's like, where these people come from? I'm in the middle of nowhere.
Were you ready for this? You're just sitting here waiting for somebody to get caught in cow traffic, and then they're like paying the guy with the cows. Yeah, it's fine. Just come out here at this time and we'll be good. Well, what's interesting to me about your experience, your really early experience, and you're telling me that, I've always done tourism. Obviously you might not have called it that. It was just, there were people coming to the place that your family, were caretakers of, that you actually held and took care of. What would you say, you were doing sustainability before maybe that was a buzzword. And I suppose there's some overlaps there with, local communities and trying to say, hey, how do we make this work? Because though there's an environmental sustainability thing, there's also the kind of sociological sustainability thing. You mentioned there's housing for 200 folks that stay there. I mean, how was it seeing that unveil, and what part did you have in that?
I'm glad to bring that up, because a lot of people mistake sustainability as being only environmental. Sustainability does build itself on three primary pillars, which is people, planet, and prosperity. So then you have the social economic aspect of it that you mentioned. And that's what's always one of the most rewarding aspects of working there, is because you were able to have an impact. And it's not just the houses that we have on the land and the individuals that live on the land, it's the entire community. We were always very conscious about making sure that we communicate the right message. For example, we would have, Saturdays and Sundays when the hotel was very full, we would invite vendors to come and show their trade. But you weren't allowed to just come and sell the necklaces. You had to come and show how you use the seeds of the local trees, and how do you dry them, and how do you make them into necklace. So we would educate the culture behind the trade of the different artisans that we brought up. And of course, 100% profits for whoever came to demonstrate. And a lot of Nicaraguans don't have reliable transportation, so we would assist in all that, because the ultimate goal was educating the public and assisting the neighboring communities. From that, the other thing that I did that I was always very proud of, I started a tour operator called Tastefully Nicaragua. And that got started because we were noticing how many small family-owned farms in the area were disappearing, because the next generation had no interest to become farmers, lowly farmers, just growing a couple of beans or growing a couple of cacaos and selling it to the co-op. But this is part of the culture of our country. So we started the tour operator to bring pride, not only additional economic development to the families, but to bring pride to the trade. So we started taking visitors to see how pitayas are grown, how rice is grown, how cacao, coffee, pineapples, the small fishing industries. And we were working specifically with small family, generational family farms. Right. And that goes back to the social economic part of the environment, aside from the fact that small farmers often treat the land better than the big, international farms. So that was extremely fulfilling as well, the work that was able to be done there.
Do you have any siblings?
I do. We have four.
Okay.
It's four of us, four daughters. My dad, we're definitely taking this in weird tangents. My dad, he studied in LA for a while, and he went and, the county festival or something. He had his palm read, right? This is a young college guy. My dad was very good looking, is very good looking, an 80-year-old man. And he got his palm read. He goes, wow, you have an amazing future. You're going to be surrounded by 5 women.
And then he has 4 daughters, and there you go.
Four daughters.
He's surrounded. Yeah. Well, and I read somewhere that you are now 5th generation of this farm, and it's woman owned. And I bring that up because I think as you're talking about, a lot of these small farmers will just the next generation goes, I want to go into the city. I want to do that, and it's not just unique to third world countries or other places like that. It's also something that I think happens in communities in the States as well, with smaller communities where the young people go, whatever's going on here, I'm not interested. I'm going to go to the city and shoot my shot and see what happens there. How does that kind of bringing it back over to the Finger Lakes and Cayuga, like, how is that something that you feel like is being addressed from a sustainability standpoint, going, well, yeah, we're trying to get visitors here, but how do we create a community that's proud of what we are? Maybe you could speak a little bit to that.
One of the efforts that does come into generational and, the audience in Cayuga that we're working on is that when we worked on this campaign, the very beginning, we started thinking, it's like, okay, we're going to elevate the message that this is Harriet Tubman's chosen hometown and educate the public. We realized that we had to start with the residents as well, right? And with the local business owners. It's what we divided between the welcome and the invitation. So the invitations, the marketing aspect of it, telling the public to come and check out the area. But we have to make sure that the local residents were also part of this whole initiative. So we started what we called the Pride of Place campaign. So we started, talking to the residents, tell us a story. Why are you proud to live in Harriet Tubman's chosen hometown? And what does that mean to you? We encountered a lot of individuals that did not know. And not only the people that we were working with, also the local Black youth who really should know and really should be connected with their heritage, and the story belongs to them primarily. And we have a couple that we work with now that were very disappointed that they felt like the system failed them by them not really being connected with this. So that's part of our initiative. That's part of the seesaw that we're working with, the local communities, to raise the pride. And we've had some amazing success. We've had some great partners have been wanting to be part of this. Last year, we had our local high school who there is a champion in the high school that said, oh, get some students together. And we had this great diverse audience of students who basically declared their pride for living in Harriet Tubman's chosen hometown. And the words that they used, these high school students, I was surprised how eloquent and how they owned it. It's like, this is part of who I am, and I am proud to be here. We've also worked with our local business owners to try to identify all the Black-owned businesses to make sure they're part of this campaign. When it comes to economic development, we want to make sure that the chain follows our mission, and that as much as possible, visitation goes and supports Black-owned and diverse-owned businesses in honor of Harriet Tubman. We realize we don't have that many. Mm-hmm. We're a very homogeneous area. So part of it, we turned around and we started talking with economic development in the areas. Like, how can we help make this a more friendly place for diverse business owners. And it was received very, very nicely. And then we start working out a little bit outside the veins of your typical tourism office and destination marketing organization. And then we get into conversations, are we converting into a destination marketing and management organization? And what does that mean? Are we blurring the lines between our role and responsibility and what economic development is doing and what the downtown business improvement districts are doing? So we're looking at partnerships. How do we partner with these other agencies to help bring the entire community, entire destination up in the direction that we see it should go, right? So it's been very rewarding and all that. And that's what I mean. I find myself in these places is like, I don't know how to say no. It would be very easy to say, no, we're a marketing agency. I'm just going to work on my marketing message and work with great marketing agencies that we've aligned ourselves with. That's why we're sitting here today. But it's not enough. And luckily, our board of directors is extremely supportive. They're like, wow, yeah, we do see how that's a challenge. And yes, that's a good partnership for you to pursue because it is my hours as executive director that I spend in these extra things that are not my typical role than what I'm supposed to be accomplishing. So it definitely is bigger and broader. And I am extremely proud and lucky to be supported by that board of directors that's very supportive, by the city of Auburn that's very supportive, by the Cayuga County legislature who has been very supportive. So I'm not saying the road has been clean and easy the long way. There's been a couple of boulders that need to be nudged out, but we have been very well received and we have been very persistent. Down to the agencies we hire, right? That's part of being authentic in what we're doing. When we decided to engage with the culturalist group, it was a very well thought out and planned route. We needed an agency who understood the authenticity and the real impact of what we're doing. Once again, it's not just a marketing campaign. Yes, the end goal, we want it to be the same as other more typical marketing campaigns, which means people know about us and people come. But it's not the quantity of visitors, it's the quality of the visitor and getting to the individuals that this history will resonate with them and they will want to continue being part of this legacy. Harriet Tubman is an individual known worldwide. I have in my office, my dad is a historian and artist, and he had done a rendition of Harriet Tubman on wood that after I took this job, I went back home. I was like, Dad, can I take that painting, please? I think it belongs in my office.
You need to put that up on the wall. Yeah.
I do. I have it up in my office. So she has power. And we want to ensure that when we speak of her, we honor her legacy. Melody Smith-Johnson, she's on my board of directors. She is one of the beacons that represents this campaign. She's the one that put it very bluntly. It's like, we need to ensure that we're not monetizing her name, but honoring her legacy.
And that's a challenging kind of razor's edge, I feel like. And I've seen a lot of destinations, having worked on the planning side. You see destinations that go, well, there's this feature or there's this historical fact or this thing, and we need to magnify that, and that's it. And then when people get into the destination, sometimes they don't see or feel that. And I can imagine, and we're talking about how you do this locally. You start with the residents being informed and aware and on your side, I guess, about it. And then you work on the advertising part of it and like, okay, now we're putting this out into the world. And now whoever happens to be targeted by this stuff, we want them to be the right person. You mentioned the quality over quantity thing. And I think that's one of those cautionary things. It's like, hey, you can spend a lot of money on advertising and it can go in a lot of different places and you can't be everywhere. And the more money you spread thin, typically the less impactful it can be on any given channel. How are you guys perhaps with the Culturist Group team or other partners you work with? How do you guys address some of the advertising challenges, or is it mostly content oriented? What's the approach there?
It's both. It's this being selective in the content that we put out there to make sure it's the right message, but it's also curating the audience that it goes to, being very selective in the channel that it goes to, the demographics, both geographically, and trying to target the interest levels. You know, we don't want somebody who's a big, I mean, there would also be a great visitor, but not for this campaign. Somebody who's, you know, big into sports or is a huge outdoors person who wants those big challenges. Well, that's great, but that's not curated to what this content is. We don't want the visitor to be, like you said, disappointed when they arrive. It's like, this is not what I was sold, and
Yeah.
I was told I was going to see when you get here. Yes. So it is both. It is making sure that the content that we get is real. For example, we don't hire actors. We work with local residents, and we try to get somebody who knows the destination, is proud of where they live, so it resonates with it. And the partners that we choose to, where we choose to shoot the sites, you know, the restaurants, the stores, the outdoor destinations are part of the message, and making sure it lands in the ears and the audiences that it works best through an agency that understands both sides of it to make sure we're trying to hit the mark.
Have you found, there's the positive side of it. There's the people that are rallying alongside that are residents, or the people that come and visit and say, hey, this has been an amazing experience, not just for the outdoors component, but also the historical component, and just the initiatives you guys are working on. What has been, if I may ask, what has been pushback, if any, that you've seen? And then how have you addressed that pushback?
Like I said, mostly we've had great success. We haven't had much pushback. But there is always those voices that say, you know, those naysayers and those residents that say, you know, why her? You know, why is she so special? You know, what's with Harriet Tubman? Why is everybody talking about Harriet Tubman? And they feel that, you know, they're more proud of the parks in the area. It's like, why don't we talk more about our parks and stop talking so much about her? And it's just a different area that they're proud of. You know, I try to think of everything positive. It's not that they hate Harriet Tubman. It's that they really think that this is much better. I mean, we have some great baseball history in our area. So it's like, why are we talking about that instead of about this? And it's the fact that it's come down to resources. You know, we can't promote everything that we have at the same level. So there's been some of that. There are some businesses that are a much better fit to the campaign than others, so we lean into their role and participation in it. Then some of the other ones where it would be a misfit when people do come and visit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting. I think people tend to see the place they live, especially if they love the place they live, they see it through the lens of the thing that they love, that they most closely identify with. And then they have a conversation with somebody who's involved in marketing, and they go, but why not do this and this and this? And like you said so well, there's a finite amount of resources, and there are certain things that at the end of the day, you might be much more similar to other nearby destinations in the region when you're looking at lakes, you know, outdoor areas, perhaps water sports, perhaps those sort of things, and that person or those people love. But you're also you're differentiated because of your historical component with Harriet Tubman and her selection of living there, and the home that they had, and that the impact that she has on history. So I love that you have something to land on. Here's another funny overlap here. I actually lived in upstate New York. Back in 2009 and 10, I lived in the Adirondacks.
Oh, wow.
In a very small hamlet, of like 800 people. I think it swelled to like 3,000 people in the summertime. And, you know, there's all the eye rolls about tourism with the locals. And you for 6 months out of the year, it's just dead. And everyone's complaining that nothing's happening, and the grocery store is closed and all this stuff. So, you know, this strange dynamic where you have locals that desire business and economic benefit to their area, and they don't want to see it die, and they don't want to see people move away. And then you have the DMOs and the CVBs looking at that destination through the lens of how can we sustain this? Because otherwise the worst case scenario is, as people leave and as people pass away, the what that destination is kind of gets lost, and the history and the stories and things like that. And perhaps most small destinations, in your case, you guys, I mean, what's the population in the county? I mean, it's pretty dense, not dense like a major city. You can still, you can throw a rock and not hit somebody sometimes. But it was interesting when I was there in upstate New York to see and talk to the woman who was in charge of the tourism in that area, and have conversations about, look, they're just trying to make local events and things that we can rally the locals around, and also be things that you can do if you're coming and visiting. And maybe you get to experience that little magic that's the other stuff, right? And sometimes you have to have your boots on the ground to see and feel that. Putting it in a visitor guide, putting it on the website is kind of step one. But I always find going someplace and actually being able to absorb it for a little bit, you feel something different. It was my experience in Nicaragua. You feel it. And then there's some places you go and you go, I don't feel it. and it may not be that it's not there. It's just, it's not there for you. And I think it's wonderful that you've landed on something there where you're like, I feel this place. I feel the history. We have these amazing stories to tell. We have these really interesting people. And now I want to kind of maybe shift gears a little bit. You've got this experience in Nicaragua with, Tastefully Nicaragua, Selva Negra, like you've got all this stuff that's your foundation of this. And you've alluded to how, okay, well, sustainability and DEI are important things in your organization today. How does some of that stuff translate? It's always in the back of your mind. You're like, this is my foundation. This is what I saw. This is what I saw that worked. How do you translate that into American, New York DMO or CVB? And you're like, I got to do something that brings some of that value that I saw coming out. Does that make sense?
I think so, because when I left Nicaragua in 2018, one of the many things that I did while being there was certifications for like Rainforest Alliance and Travel Life. And everything was through the lens, very different lens of a developing country. And when you think about all these, you think of the challenges of a developing country. And those don't happen in, the US and Germany and Japan. But there's always something that is happening, something that can be improved. And I did have those conversations with myself when I get here. It's like, what's my role? How can I be impactful and bring some of what I love about my job, which is, elevating real, genuine stories and supporting and helping to elevate a whole community. I've mentioned a couple of things that I was able to do through these veins in Cayuga County, but I'm also part of the Finger Lakes Regional Tourism Council, which is an agency of tourism for the entire Finger Lakes region. And we are embarking in a responsible tourism campaign, mostly geared towards the environmental aspect of it, with social economic impacts as well. But it's in my vein to look to see how we can improve. And I have a younger generation. I mentioned that I have kids and I homeschool them. They're both recent graduated from college or still in college, and seeing things through their eyes, the environmental impact of what's happening in the world right now, it's happening everywhere. Mm-hmm. And it is an important topic to keep in mind. So yes, there's a lot of things that we can improve anywhere. The Finger Lakes region is an amazingly, abundantly beautiful outdoor destination, but the water preservation of the lakes is very top on mind. There are some times that some lakes are closed because of the algae bloom in the water. It's a they closed the beaches off. Where's that algae bloom coming from? A lot of people say it's strictly agricultural based, but it's not strictly agricultural based. A lot of the farms in the area are being very sustainable. So, but it's the human impact. So there's a lot of conversations that can and should be had about what residents can do to improve their destination, but also the impact that visitors have when they come here. What is the visitor's responsibility? I'm an avid kayaker. I love kayaking. One of the challenges I had for myself, my husband last year, was to kayak all the 11 Finger Lakes over one summer. I went and broke my wrist when I only had 2 lakes left. So that was very emotionally challenging for me. But anyway, but you can't just take a kayak out of one lake and go kayak another lake that same day. You have to treat your kayak. You have to wash the kayak in order not to transport potentially things from one. Exactly. So, so there are things that are responsibility both for the resident and the visitor, and the visitor needs to be educated on how to be a responsible visitor to the Finger Lakes area. So these things are out there that can be done. You just need to come with a lens of looking at it of how can we make an impact. And I go back to partnerships. I'm a huge partnership person, right? So start talking to New York State Parks, start talking to DEC. How can we collaborate? What are you doing that now we have this money to help build a responsible tourism campaign? Instead of inventing something, let's support and elevate what other people are doing and are doing right, and then educate people about it. So I don't know if this is where your question was going, but the work can be done and needs to be done everywhere, regardless of what the destination is.
No, I think that was a fantastic answer. I think, it's very apparent that, that your background and your experience and kind of seeing, in a way, you had the benefit of a smaller ecosystem in some sense, where you're like, okay, we can kind of control some aspects of the ecosystem here at Selva Negra, and we can make sure we can address, okay, we can't get people out here, so how do we get people here? How do we get the workers here? How do we make sure they can get home? How do we make sure that their wares are being presented in a way that allows them to get the benefit of that? And it's a collective benefit, and so you get this smaller subset of what could be, a larger city, or more than that, a region, and you kind of get the taste of those things. You're like, okay, that worked, that did not work. Okay, this thing might be able to translate to what we're doing over here. And I guess as the ecosystem gets larger, partnerships are absolutely even more and more important than they are when it's a really small, maybe it's a small independent business. But go ahead.
Pause a second. Let me tell you something that you just said, the way I summarized it. When I was in Nicaragua, I was a big fish in a little pond. And then I came here and I'm like, I'm a minnow in the ocean. I don't know what to do with this. Where do I belong?
Well, and also you came in 2018, right? You started in 2018 there. I feel like 2018 and 19 into 20, it was like the conversations about destination management were so big because over-tourism was starting to get a spotlight. In a lot of destinations, it was like, man, we're doing great. Everyone's traveling. People are spending money. Everyone's happy. But these areas are getting beat up because of that. And then COVID hit. I wasn't sure when COVID was going to come in the conversation, but how did that, you have the 2018, you got a year or two to get your feet wet and understand your part in this and your role and maybe where the organization was at and maybe where the destination is at. And then you get hit with COVID and the impact of that. How did you kind of roll through that as an organization and perhaps adjust some of your focus?
I think that in large parts, COVID allowed us to really launch in this very authentic move forward when it comes to Harriet Tubman's hometown, because we put a pause button, right? Nothing was really happening. So we took a strong look internally. Who are we? What are we doing? Where are we headed? We canceled a bunch of contracts because we just didn't know if we'd be able to fulfill them because we didn't know what revenue we were going to have. We restructured the organization some. We were always very socially conscious as an organization, even before I stepped in. But my coworker, Claire Dunlap, who's the marketing manager, and myself, when we started talking about Harriet Tubman, we knew that if we were going to do this, it had to be an internal inspection first, right? So it allowed us to take a look at our bylaws, to take a look at our handbook, to take a look at our committees and what responsibilities each committee had, to take a look visually our board of directors. It was an all-white board of directors. Like, we need voices to step in here who can ensure that we are being authentic. We might think we're going down the right track, but we ask the voices that the story belongs to. They might not agree with that. It's like, no, you really need to. So it allowed us to pause and look at each one of those things with more time, dedicating the time that are required to do things right. So in that respect, it was really good. We lost 2 very good staff members during COVID. So that was a little bit of a struggle, but we onboarded more staff with a new vision in mind, thinking. And the other thing we looked at, of course, was our staffing and our employment outreach in order to try to get more diverse voices on track. And then we started looking, our DEI statement. What are we saying officially? And how can we help our partners prepare? Because it's not just about us. Let's get our house in order, and then let's start reaching out, helping others to improve the way that they're structured and to help them look intrinsically. One of the organizations we started working with in 2020, we were introduced to the organization beforehand, is called Travel Unity. Travel Unity is their mission is to bring inclusivity to the tourism. That's pretty much it. So they work with both travelers, destinations, hotels, restaurants, so all the purveyors of the tourism industry. And they have, just like I went through certification process for sustainability, we went through a certification process on DEI principles.
So for those listening, the cat is making an appearance on the desk with a tail saying, please give me attention. Sorry, go ahead.
Thank you for translating all those noises, Seth. I really appreciate it. So now we are Travel Unity certified at level 1 as an organization. Claire Dunlap has done the Certified Tourism Professional CDTP. I forget what it stands for. The Certified Diversity Tourism Professional. There you go. I got it. Nice. And which, that's how we looked internally at all of our documents. So that pause helped us really solidify and set the roots to a campaign in order to allow the tree of marketing to grow, if you want to put that analogy in there. And we developed a advisory committee, for lack of a better word. We called it the Harriet Tubman Communications Committee. So that when we started talking, and there's the kitty cat making her audio known too.
She has some important things to say. We'll give her a second. Let's see what she has to say here. No, now she stops. As soon as you stop, she stopped. So you created the Harriet Tubman Advisory Committee. Yeah.
Yeah. So that when we spoke of Harriet Tubman, we tried to tread the right way. One example. I love getting my hand slapped because I know that people are listening and people are holding me accountable for my actions. The movie Harriet came out about this time, and we wanted to talk about Harriet. And we like, if we're going to do a campaign, we wanted to come meet Harriet kind of thing. They were like, stop. She is Harriet Tubman, or she is Tubman.
Oh, interesting.
She's not your Harriet. Right? Because would you ever call George? No, you say President George Washington. Mm-hmm. Right? And I was like, that is a familiarity that I don't own.
And that's such a nuance, but it's something that I suppose this is why you have other voices to say, hey, by the way, nudge, nudge. I know you're not doing anything purposefully disrespectful or anything like that, but it's great to have those voices.
Yeah, yeah. So, and that's exactly why we formed the committees to help us in that direction. With them, we also developed a couple of media sheets, one about the different locations in the area where Harriet Tubman had a direct relation with, like the Seward Museum, the Howland Stone Store Museum, Harriet Tubman Home, of course, Port Hill Cemetery, where she's buried, the Equal Rights Heritage Center, and on, to identify the locations where she had part of her story. The church where she married Nelson, her second husband. And but we also developed a list of traits. Harriet Tubman is known as the Moses of her people, as the Underground Railroad conductor. But she was a cook, a nurse, a Civil War spy. She led the first military battalion ever as a woman, as a Black woman. She owned property. She was a humanitarian, philanthropist, a public speaker. And these are all traits about her that not many people talk about. She was a forager. We're hoping to bring in a media fam this summer, focus on her, Harriet Tubman in the outdoors. Go foraging, look at the skies, what does moss tell you in the trees? So with the committee, we identified all these traits of hers so that we could better educate who she is as a holistic individual, right? So they were pivotal in coming up with all those tidbits, all those bits of information that we share with the media and with our visitors.
Well, I think, the idea that COVID allowed you to reset, I've heard that from a lot of destinations. And I feel like a lot of destinations over the years, you get partnerships with certain organizations or, things that you contribute your marketing dollars toward that might be local efforts or magazines or things like that. And COVID allowed a lot of organizations to say no and have a really good reason for saying no, when in the past it was a little more squishy. They didn't have as good of a reason besides, why are we putting these dollars toward this thing that we don't really know what results are from this? Or maybe it's the local softball team. Sorry for somebody listening. If you have a local softball team that you support, great, continue to support them. But really, COVID to me was this moment where are our dollars going? Where are our resources going? Where is our attention going? And just like you said, you could stop and say, who are we? And what are we here for? And you're on the tail end, or maybe perhaps in the middle of that, like, are we a destination management organization? How do we address sustainability? How do we address DEI? And kind of going and creating this new tree that you spoke of, where you're like, okay, from here forward, this is kind of our roots, and sure, we're gonna have some branches that go off, and maybe we go back to supporting the softball team once we get this tree really nicely rooted, and we feel like as an organization we have that foundation. Coming from the kind of marketing and the paid advertising side of things, that's always a challenge. You have a finite budget, and I'm putting together a marketing plan for somebody, and they come to me and they say, hey, by the way, I know I told you we had this much money, but I got to put 20% of it toward this thing that's happening, because we've always done it that way.
Yeah.
And so that's one of the things during COVID, that coming out of it, being on the other side and going, okay, wow, a lot of other destinations did a similar reset of priorities, and organizations like the Culturist Group, they're saying, hey, this shouldn't be a secondary campaign for many, many destinations. This should be the lead. This is the lead thing, and then other things follow. The natural resources, the beauty, the hiking activities, things like that a lot of destinations have. What's truly your differentiator, and what are you communicating as your cultural differentiator that allows people to, I think, connect, like actually connect to something. I can connect to somebody who loves hiking because I love hiking. I connect to somebody that loves coffee, but there's something about being able to sit and talk about either a person in history that you want to emulate their traits. And you mentioned Harriet Tubman being somebody who she had all these traits that you don't often get in the headline in a history book. Go ahead, Harriet Tubman did this and this and this, and the Underground Railroad and this, and there's your blurb about Harriet Tubman. So I love that you're taking efforts to really expand that story, spread that to your local residents, get them excited about it, and then share that with the world and the world of people who perhaps are the right folks to come and visit, and really the quality over quantity equation, the people that are really going to love what they experience when they're there.
Yeah. And the destination stays with them because there was that connection. So when they talk about it, it would be in a much more personal way, and they might return. I mean, we've had several instances through this effort of people who have relocated. They're like, this is where I want to live, that there's an impact that I can have here. And I feel like this is my community. This is where I belong. So that to me is a huge accomplishment as a tourism destination. Yeah. When talking to the legislators and talking to my board, we talk about that cyclical of the visitors. The visitor today could be the resident tomorrow and could be the business owner of the day after. So that's the connection. And when we work with the tourism ambassadors, which are local residents, and they tell their story, why they love their hometown, we tell them all the time, it's like, you might be talking to your next door neighbor someday, because you're sharing that love of your destination, and we want people to have that.
So I have to ask, maybe you're not allowed to have favorites where you live and represent, but if somebody was coming to visit for a weekend, or we're having a 5-day visit, let's go with 5-day, longer length of stay, people. What's some things that somebody should do in 5 days?
Should do. We've mentioned the historical content. You have to connect with Harriet Tubman, and that is much more than just her places, because she came here for a reason. The location was already here. It was already a strong equal rights movement location. So, visit her home, visit all the locations that have her associated with it, the Seward House Museum, the equal rights, the church, the cemetery. But right next door, and this is my next county I'm going to talk about, so my board might not be happy enough. It was a huge suffrage movement. The women's right to vote started right here. Seneca Falls is a huge historical destination in its own. Rochester, New York has Frederick Douglass, and those are all just in the equal rights veins. If you ask me, you got to go kayaking. It is the Finger Lakes. It is so gorgeous. And seeing it from the water, I mean, these are glacial lakes. You get yourself on the lake and you see the hills on either side rising next to you. And I grew up in Florida. I spent many years in the South, both Florida and Texas. There's no alligators. You don't have to worry about the alligators up here. Okay? It is wonderful water, wonderful environment. We have the Erie Canal crosses through the entire area. Also a huge part of the story when it comes to the abolition movement and freedom seekers headed to Canada. But when you kayak, you can go through a lock, which means you kayak in, they shut it behind you, and suddenly water is bubbling up from underneath you, and you're rising up, and you're like in this block. It is such a wonderful feeling. It is so cool. And our north, we have Lake Ontario. The Finger Lakes region goes from Lake Ontario all the way to the border with Pennsylvania. So it's an area about the size of New Jersey, which is big. So in Lake Ontario, you have the bluffs, which makes for beautiful views of the lake. It's like Susan Gately, one of the individuals that we promote because she's a historian and environmentalist. She calls it the landlocked sea, because it is so huge. You cannot see the other side. It has currents. But so the view of Lake Ontario from the bluffs in Sterling Nature Center is something not to be missed. What else? Love restaurants. We have tons of farm-to-table restaurants. The agriculture in the Finger Lakes region, Cayuga County, is extremely important. I believe we're one of the counties with the most dairy production. So dairy products are super good. We have great ice cream. We have great cheese. And of course, sweet corn is not to be missed. It is so good. Farm markets are excellent. We have this trail called the Sweet Treat Trail that connects a lot of bakeries and ice cream places and chocolatiers and farms that is great family friendly, and breweries. The Finger Lakes region is known for its wine. We have world-class wines, but I'm a beer girl because I've got some German in me. So I definitely gravitate more towards the breweries personally. We have some award-winning breweries in Cayuga County, Prison City, Lunkenheimer's, Summerhill, the Next Chapter. I should have started with names because then I'm going to want to name them all, and I can't. So another tangent, I'll tell you a fun personal story that I did during 2020. People talk about COVID babies and COVID dogs. There was no way I was having any more either one of those. So my husband and I got a COVID bus. We purchased an old school bus.
Amazing.
For $4,000. The engine is good, but everything else got ripped up. We converted it into an RV. It has a little kitchen. It has a compostable toilet. It has a double-sized bed, a little sofa, but that's it. So we're big Harvest Host people. So we stay at Harvest Host wineries and breweries primarily because then I don't have to worry about driving home safely. I can just stumble over to my bus and spend and stay in my bus. So with that, we have visited a lot of breweries in Cayuga and the whole Finger Lakes region, and that has been a lot of fun. So I think I gave you a little bit of a taste what to do if you come.
Cool. I think that's amazing. You froze there at the end a little bit, but I think it got you on your side, so we'll revisit it. But I think sounds like there is a trove of riches and things to do there, so there's no shortage of that. Now I want to ask the same question as it relates to Nicaragua. There are probably people listening that have never thought about going to Nicaragua. And I hope that they consider it now because it's beautiful and amazing and the people are wonderful. And you fly into Managua and then you just go from there to either a volcanic island in the middle of a large lake or the Pacific side where you can surf, or you can go to the Caribbean, or you can go up into the mountains in Matagalpas. Like, what are you going to tell people to do?
Oh my God. Thank you so much for opening the floor to that question. I love it. So Nicaragua has been known for the land of lakes and volcanoes. And a weird little tidbit that I learned not long ago from my daughter, I'm going to throw it in here. Way back when the Panama Canal was built, Nicaragua was considered as one of the locations where to put the canal because it has the large lake and it has the Rio San Juan, which connects it from the Atlantic side. And one of the reasons that they stopped considering it is because they saw the stamp of Nicaragua that has lots of volcanoes. And they said, it seems a little dangerous to put the canal there. So they moved it over to Panama. I don't know how much authenticity there is in that story, but, it has plausibility. We'll put it that way.
Yeah, I could say you'd want to plausibly avoid volcanoes and volcanic activity. There may also have been a component to, digging out a giant canal, encountering lava rock maybe is a bit more challenging. I'm just adding, this is more to the theory, right? And this is completely adding conjecture here.
But yes, lakes and volcanoes are one of the where people think about a lot going to Nicaragua. We have active volcanoes that you can go to the crater and look down at the lava because it's a continuously active volcano as far as gases. So you don't want to stay up there too long. But then we have other volcanoes that are, that could be explosive, and those are kind of like towards León. And then you have the volcano Cerro Negro that is also continuously spewing, but it's tiny, tiny little ash. And because of where it sits in the current of the wind, all this really soft ash all goes to one side. And that's what they do volcano boarding. So if you're a snowboarder, that's something that you might want to consider. Totally rad, totally out there. But surfing both on both coasts, especially down towards San Juan, closer to the Costa Rica border, is very popular. León and Granada are amazing colonial cities. And on the Atlantic coast, like you said, it's a whole different world. It's, you have the whole reggae vibe. And the islands are so amazing. They're majestic. They're just the purity of being in the Caribbean. And then you have Little Corn Island that you can only access it by boat, right? And that's a whole adventure.
Yeah, we stayed in Little Corn. We have a little bit of I'll sorry to interrupt you. We got to Nicaragua. We stayed there. We went to Ometepe. That was where the first part of our trip. We did a couple days in Granada, and Granada was the only time we stayed in a nicer place. We stayed in an eco lodge in Ometepe, and then we get on a plane in Managua, a 12-seater to take us out to Bighorn. And so you fly over and you get to Bighorn, and then from Bighorn you get an Apanga, which is just for those listening, it is a large metal boat with, that's got a outboard motor on the back of it, and you either sit on the metal seat or you sit on your life vest. Maybe you want your life vest on, but I sat on mine because there was a tropical storm coming in. And so we were getting these 15 and 20 foot swells on our way out. And it was fun. It was a fun adventure, but it's about 45 minutes on the Panga from Bighorn to Little Corn. And then the first couple days we were in Little Corn, there was a tropical storm, and it was just thunder and lightning and waves, and it was amazing. I mean, it was just a beautiful Caribbean experience. And then it cleared up, and the mistake I made was I decided, I'll just lay out and read by the beach now that it's sunny. And I'm very pale.
Oh, no, you did not.
And after 1 hour of being in the sun reading, I started seeing a sunburn develop, and I was like, okay, I'm done being in the sun. 1 hour was much too much. So if you go to Nicaragua, the sunscreen. This is the cautionary tale from someone who once looked like a lobster last year in Nicaragua. and like the return flight, I was walking like I had like casts around everything just because everything was so burnt. But at least that was at the end of my adventure.
Good.
In Nicaragua.
Good.
But I went scuba diving. You can go scuba diving off Little Corn. It is amazing. And before we had first talked about, when Nicaragua came up as an idea to go for our vacation, I had no idea. None of it. I had no idea about any of it. I just knew where it was and assumed it was probably similar in some ways to Costa Rica. So, yeah, was very pleasantly surprised and very happy that you can make a trip in each of those areas. You could make a whole vacation in one. And in fact, when we go back next month, we're going to be just kind of in one area. We are going to go to Apoyo and spend a couple days there. And
Laguna de Apoyo?
Laguna de Apoyo, yeah. So,
oh my gosh, see, we lived and worked in the north, and that is the number one destination you go to, of course. But my vacation spot was always Laguna de Apoyo. That is one of the most beautiful, majestic, tranquil places. I mean, you're swimming in a volcanic crater.
Yeah, I'm very excited. Yeah. I'm very, very excited. You're making me more excited about this. So
there's still little thermal pods. There's still little thermal pods where you can go and sit in the water so hot you cannot stay in it too long because there's still, and that's kind of scary, volcanic activity underneath, bubbling up through the water.
You are not, you are living on an earth that's living and vibrant, and you kind of feel a little bit closer to it, I think, when you're in places like that.
So, flying out to Corn Island, flying out to the Pacific. The first time my husband and I went, this is like 98 maybe, we flew into Bluefields, and we're in that tiny little plane that you're describing, right? And all you see is thick, dense rainforest as you drive. I mean, thick, green, deep. And I'm thinking, shit, we crash here. Nobody's ever going to find us, right? And then it's such a small plane. You're right behind the pilot and the co-pilot. And we see them pointing and looking around and tipping the plane. I'm like, what's going on? And then suddenly it's like, there, they point to the airport. They were scouting out for the airports. Like,
where is it?
Radar
there it is.
Stuff. Yeah. So it is always an adventure. But anyway, I left the best for last. So then you go to the highlands of Nicaragua, and that is the production area. That's where the coffee and the cacao comes from, and the rice. Sebaco, which is part of the Pan American Highway, when you go through there, it's such a fertile soil. And it's a marketplace. You have so many different products that conjoin in there. And then you go stay with my parents at Selva Negra. Because
Perfect.
That is the best place in the entire country.
Okay, so we already have to plan our next vacation to Nicaragua after this one. And it'll have to be to Selva Negra. We can't miss it.
I know.
Well, so I want to be mindful of time. I want to know, is there anything else that you'd like to talk about that we haven't had a chance to discuss today?
I don't even remember most of the things we talked about already, Seth. I know that our reason for coming together was not Nicaragua. That was a happy happenstance. But it's to, to tell, to try to onboard other destinations to really think about the authentic character and fiber of their place, their destination, and find those authentic stories and connect them with the community. We're not just creating ads and what do you call it? Announcements and commercials of the destination. Our responsibility is both-sided, is to work with the community and helping them represent themselves the way that they feel about their community, and communicating that to the public and bringing the two together so that everybody can grow and love what they're doing.
Wow. Well, thank you, Karen. This has been awesome. I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to me today and to talk about what you've been involved in. I loved hearing about Nicaragua. I loved hearing about the Finger Lakes and Cayuga and everything that's happening there. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you, Seth. I look forward to hearing from you again.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Destination Interesting. It's my hope with the podcast to have great, casual, informative chats with folks like Karen. If you'd like to nominate yourself or someone you know to be on the show, please reach out to us at destinationinteresting.com. Talk to you soon.